Welcome to episode 57 of the Hoop Threads podcast. Got a very special guest on today, Don Showalter, with the USA Junior National Team. Coach Show, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing?
Man, a little under the weather right now.
That's what I hear.
Recovering from COVID, but I'll live. I'm here and get the chance to talk to you. So it's a great day. So kind of take me to the beginning of your journey, you know, how you got to where you are in your position now.
Okay.
And we'll kind of get into some of the specifics and zoom in.
Yeah. Well, we'll start from the beginning, right out of college. In fact, I started coaching while I was in college, actually, as an assistant coach while I was in college and played basketball in college. But I had right out of college, I was a head coach. I never spent really as time as an assistant, so to speak. So a little different path than most coaches take. I think for me, it was a good path. I'm not sure I'd recommend it for all coaches. I think there's some real value in being an assistant in a really good program. But I had 4 jobs in Iowa, 4 high school jobs in Iowa in 42 years. And all those were different. My first job was I really had to build a culture, build a program, because they were like 0-18 0-36 for 2 years.
Wow.
So I really had to take that program and do something different with it. And then the other job, then I took a job after 2 years, took another job, which was a very good job, a great basketball job. So they had a lot of success. So I had to sustain a lot of culture that was already there. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to my alma mater for 28 years. And my high school coach was a great guy that I played for. He had really brought a big basketball culture to Mid-Prairie. And I just, I had to step in there and just really kind of sustain that and continue the youth development that I had with those kids, and that actually started with those kids. And the programs are built with your youth, and you can say all you want to with, high school programs, but if the high school programs don't have good youth programs, you're certainly not going to do very well. And then I ended up my coaching career at a large, very diverse high school in Iowa City, which was a great way to kind of end my career. But we had to start kind of from scratch with that again. So really 4 different levels, 4 different high schools, 4 different challenges to each one of those. So enjoyed each one of them, learned a lot from each one of those. During the time, I also got on with USA Basketball and coached their teams, and was on some committees and helped out with the festivals. And my first coaching gig with USA Basketball was in the Hoop Summit in 1998. And I always tell people that we played against a floppy-haired German kid by the name of Dirk Nowitzki in that game, and nobody really knew of him until that game. And we held him to like 35 points and 25 rebounds, I think it was. That was kind of my first initiation into USA Basketball and coaching at that level, and had a great time there. Rashard Lewis was one of our key guys there for that out of Houston, so we had a good team. I wouldn't say it was a great team, probably not as good as some of the other ones we had. And then we had USA Basketball had some festivals that went on during that period of time where we brought in 40 players from all areas of the country, north, south, east, west teams. And in that group was LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, Jason Kidd. It had some really good high school players. And we just played kind of a mini Olympics during that time. So I coached in one of those, and then I was also on the selection committee and committee that brought in those kids until 2009. And in 2009, FIBA started their U16, U17 programs for all the countries. And then they asked me to coach that group in 2009. and then I did that until 2018. And now I kind of oversee that program by scouting kids and bringing kids into that program. So that's kind of in a short version, that's kind of my pathway to where I am today.
I mean, under 5 minutes, you nailed it, coach. Efficiency. So kind of going back to you as a young coach, how would you describe yourself, and, what were some of the first lessons you had to learn as a young coach, as far as, coming up with your philosophy and then kind of implementing and changing things as you went?
Well, I think as young coaches, we all think we know what's going on, and we can go into any situation and win right away and all that kind of stuff. I found out real quickly that it takes more than just basketball knowledge, so to speak, and there's a lot to learn in the game of coaching. And my first, as a young coach, I go back to my practice sessions as a young coach, and I look at them, I go, how did we ever get anything done with these practice sessions? So it's kind of fun to look back on those. But I think as a young coach, first of all, I love the game of basketball. And secondly, I was really a sponge with what to learn. So I worked a lot of camps, went to a lot of clinics. I ended up working UCLA, John Wooden's basketball camps for 20 years. I worked 5-star camp, which was at that time, during those periods, that's where everybody went. That was really before the age of AAU basketball. So kids went to camps. But and then secondly, I think having some mentors in your life really helped me as a young coach. And I had mentors in the state of Iowa that I looked up to as coaches. I also had mentors like John Wooden at UCLA, who couldn't get a better mentor than him. So I think getting a mentor for a young coach is probably one of the most important things a young coach can do to improve themselves as a coach and as a person.
Talk about, how that relationship with Coach Wooden started. I think you said that you wrote him a handwritten note and then kind of drove across the country to get there.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing, because I think, to me, a young coach needs to show initiative to what they want to do. And, I was raised, my dad always was very, he was a person who never pushed me in any direction as far as sports and athletics, but he expected that I when I did something, he expected me to do it to the best of my ability. And so he made that really an impact on me as a young kid, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old growing up. And so that initiative, I think, carried over to coaching. And so I just said to myself, well, if I want to learn from the best, I got to work their camps. And so I wrote a handwritten note to John Wooden at UCLA back in the early 70s. And I just said, I'd love to work your camp. And I really didn't figure I'd hear back from him. But a couple of weeks later, I got a handwritten note back from Coach Wooden, which I still have. And he just said, we're filled for this year, but I'm going to give your information to Sports World, who ran the camps. And I figured, well, okay, so at least he acknowledged that I wanted to work. And then about a week before camp started, Sports World called me and said, hey, we need a counselor. At this time, I was just right out of college, so they said, hey, we need a counselor. We have more kids than we thought. Can you come out and be a counselor? And I go, hey, I'm there. So I jumped in the car and went out to California. And while I was out there, the following week, a coach couldn't work for some reason. So they asked me to step in and be one of the camp coaches. And that was really my, obviously my time where I could show what I could do, and they liked it, and I was back ever since. So for about 20 years, I got to know Coach Wooden very well. He's not only a great coach, he's a great person, very loyal to people that show him loyalty, and so I just got to know him really well, and was able to use him as a mentor in a lot of ways, and learn from him. So that was probably one of the highlights of my young career as a coach who would work in his camps every summer.
Mm, mm. Got you. So what were some of the things that like you took back, and like some of the things that you changed? Were you kind of like a defensive minded coach at the beginning and you took back some, UCLA actions and stuff, or was it kind of the other way around? How did that work?
Yeah, I think as a coach, you look at what other coaches are doing. Even just because I worked John Wooden's camp doesn't necessarily mean I took everything he did, but when you're around coaches, you tend to, as a young coach, you tend to take in, you try and do too much. Hey, I like this, I'm gonna put it out like this. So I think what helped me out was Coach Wooden would say to me, he says, now, you look at what you have, and try and use the parts of what you learn maybe this summer or with other coaches, and put it in your own program, make it yours. And so, I took a lot of the practice thoughts that he had, and kind of changed my philosophy about practices. He did a lot of line drills for fundamental work, and it was a very efficient way to work on skill development. So I did a lot of that, and I still do that with my camps, and even with our junior national team. I did a lot of line drill work. His philosophy on pressing was really intriguing to me. I had grown up in a program in high school that we pressed all the time, and so I kind of took some of that, some of what Coach Wooden was doing with his 2-2-1 press, and kind of mixed it up a little bit, and came up with my own kind of press action that I really liked, and continue to do throughout my coaching career. So a lot of those things really formulated my thought process on coaching, how to conduct a practice, the efficient way to conduct a practice. The pace of your practice is really important. How you can conduct a practice with good pace, and learning that coaches, that you control the pace, not the kids. Kids want to control the pace of a practice, but Coach Wooden was always really emphatic that here's the way, here's how we practice, and it was really at a fast pace, and he didn't let players control the pace. So I took that a lot, and then I think one of the main things I took from him was, it's not really what you teach, it's how you teach it. And so you can teach it. Basketball can be very successful in a lot of different ways to coaches, if they, first of all, they have to, have an understanding of what they want done, but it's how you teach it. It's not so much what offense you run or what defense you run. It's how you're going to teach those things, and how much your players understand it. Not so much how much you know as a coach, or how much you think that you know as a coach. It's what your players really get from it. So those are the kind of things that I learned as a young coach that stuck with me really for the full duration of the time I was coaching.
We'll get to that, the practice planning and stuff in one second, but I wanted to touch on the camps real quick, because I know Snow Valley is very important to you. It kind of seems like that's your spin on Coach Wooden's camps, as far as the fundamentals, and really wanting to teach and really hammer in that stuff, because a lot of the camps that the kids go to, it's maybe 20 minutes of skill work and then games, but it's not really how Snow Valley operates, from what I'm told. I haven't worked it yet. We'll get the coach, but talk about your vision for that, and where it's at right now, and kind of where you want it to go, and what you want it to teach kids every year.
Yeah, Snow Valley has a long history. It has about 55 years of been in existence in the United States. Really, Herb Livesey, who now works for the Nuggets, scout for the Nuggets. He's the one that first brought Snow Valley to California, and it was the name Snow Valley. It's named Snow Valley because it got started in the Snow Valley Mountains of San Bernardino, and so it's just kind of called Snow Valley. It was an outdoors camp, very skilled skill development camp. In fact, Bob Cousy was. You're too young to know who Bob Cousy is.
No, I know who he is. Number 14 for the Celtics.
That's right. But he's actually the guy who first had Snow Valley Camp. He called it by a different name. It was his own camp.
Yep.
And then Herb Livesey actually bought the camp from Bob Cousy because Herb had worked camp for years in the Boston area. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of funny because then Herb bought the camp from Cousy and then moved it to California. Yeah. and call it Snow Valley. And so as the process goes, I work being out in California a lot in the summertime with John Wooden's camps. I found out that Snow Valley was really the camp that everybody said you need to work if you really want to work at camp to improve as a coach. Mm-hmm. And so in about mid 80s, I started working Snow Valley camp and got to know Herb really well and worked that camp and got to really appreciate the fact that it was a teaching camp for both players and coaches. Mm-hmm. And so Jerry Slykouse, a good friend of mine, who has since tragically got killed in a car accident about 5 years ago, but we both worked it, and we purchased a franchise of Snow Valley because we said, this would really go well in the Midwest. It's kind of you're up at 6 a.m. in the morning, and it's kind of, I think, a good, really good Midwest type of basketball camp. So we purchased the camp, and it's been going now in Iowa for over 25 years. And it's a skill development. We do clinics, work on skilled clinics all day from 6 a.m. in the morning, and then the kids only play one game a day, and that's at night. Fully coached. Their coach. There's only seven players per team, so everybody gets a chance to play a lot. We have a great 7-to-1 coaching player ratio, so we don't, we want to make sure that every kid's getting individual attention on it. It's probably one of those camps where it's very much like the old 5-star camp back in the day when 5-star was going strong, and it was the camp to have. Howard Garfinkel, of course, was the owner and operator of the 5-star camp. Mm-hmm. But so it's kind of those two, Snow Valley and the 5-star were the two really dominant skill development camps. Mm-hmm. And now 5-star has kind of tailed off. A lot of that was due to now kids play. They play so much basketball on teams and AU teams and club teams and play on the circuit and all that kind of stuff. They really don't go to camps as much anymore. We're very fortunate. We still have about 1,500 kids per summer. Wow. For 4 sessions in our Snow Valley camp. So wow. That's kind of the way that whole thing progressed, and it's still going strong. And obviously we try and keep that going. We tweak it a little bit, but we still get kids up at 6 a.m. and it's kind of a situation where they make it through the week at camp. It's kind of a badge of honor. Hey, we made it through, and I never asked the kids really what they thought of the camp until about 2 or 3 weeks after they leave the camp. But we have great return rates. 60 to 75% of the kids return year after year. So I think there's still a need for. Yeah, I think there's still a need for it. Yeah, and I think the parents see what's happening, and they still see a real need for that as well, to send their son or daughter. We have a girls session as well, son or daughter, to a camp that really stresses the fundamentals. It's not just a playing camp and don't get any coaching. So
it sounds like a Hoosiers training day type of camp. So
yeah, exactly.
Let's go to practice planning. What does every practice need to have, and what are some of the drills that need to be a part of every practice that you put together?
Well, I think a practice plan, basically, I really divide it out into thirds. We have I say a third of it should be skill work, skill development. Mm-hmm. And so if you have an hour practice, you have 20 minutes of that should be skill work. No matter if it's your first practice, your 15th, 25th, or the last practice of the year. I think you still need to have a third of it be skill work, skill development. So that's always a piece of it. Now, it doesn't have to be like if you have an hour practice, it doesn't have to be 20 minutes designated for skill work. It can be like the first 5 minutes for skill work, and then we can go on to something else and come back to skill work. So interspersed in that practice is a third of skill development. Then a third needs to be on what we call whole offense. Developing your offense, maybe 3-on-3, a lot of work in 3-on-3. One thing that we went to with the junior national team, as well as we went to a lot of 3-on-3 work. We think that's a great way to teach skills. We think skills are enhanced a lot with 3-on-3 work. Using your left hand, defensive wise, you cover up for people. So we do a lot of 3-on-3 work. We call that whole offense, but obviously 4-on-4 and building up to 5-on-5, depending on what age level you're coaching. And then a third of it should be on whole defense, however that translates. Maybe you're working on your full court press for 5 minutes. That's a part of whole defense. But also maybe you're working 5 minutes on your shell drill, rotations. So that's part of the whole defense. So I think that's one of the things that really helped me as a younger coach is to kind of establish, all right, I'm going to spend a third of my time in each of these three areas. Out of bounds plays might be part of your whole offense. Defending out of bounds plays might be part of your whole defense. Teaching kids how to set proper screens is part of your skill development. So, basically my practice for 2 hours, so 40 minutes, 40, and 40, I think. If I'm not a math major, but if I think that's right, that's about a 2-hour practice. So I think that helped me establish what I wanted to get done in a 2-hour practice. And then, I always thought I could get a lot more done than as a young coach. I always thought, I had maybe 5 drills listed I wanted to get done. I only got through 2 of them. I didn't feel that was a very good practice. So the longer I coached, the more simple I got with my drills and made sure that they were the drills that I wanted to implement in my system. I wasn't just going to do a drill just for the sake of doing the drill. I want to do a drill that related to what I was doing with my team. And I think that Coach Wooden always said that. He said, make sure that your drills relate to what you're doing as a team. He says, it doesn't do much good to just do drills and not have them relate specifically to a part of your game. So when his practice sessions, he really broke down his offense into 2- and 3-man pieces of the high post UCLA offense. And that's what he worked on. And then he translated it into 3-on-3 work, 4-on-4 work, 5-on-5 work. So as a young coach, I think that helped me out tremendously with practice schedules and how to make a practice. Like I said earlier, the pace of your practice is very, very important. Kids, when you say go to the baseline, kids will walk to the baseline and not sure. So I think as a coach, hey, that's not the pace we want. We want a pace where you run to your drill and you get into the drill right away. Because that's a pace that you play with in games. It's not a slow pace. It's a game pace. So that's the other thing I think in my practices I got much better at the longer I coached is building game pace into my practices.
Yeah, that's the one thing I noticed. I was lucky enough to go to your guys' mini camp. I believe it was in Minneapolis at the Final Four.
Yep.
And that was what stood out to me, was like the intensity and like the communication, how loud it was, and like you said, the pace. There was something I think I heard you say in the clinic where you said, like, I never repeat myself. Like,
Yep.
I give the direction for the drill, and if you don't know where you're supposed to be, then that's on you,
Yeah.
because that teaches players that they better actually lock in when you're talking in practice.
Yep.
Talk about what goes, like, some of the really important elements that go into building like a very loud, very active practice, because it can be pulling teeth, especially the age level you're talking about, with youth levels, and then where I coach the high school level, getting energy from the kids and getting kids to talk. What are some of the tricks that you have to kind of building that communication?
Yeah, well, I think, you mentioned one that I go back to a lot is players need to make sure they listen the first time. It's really important. You call a timeout in a game, and they all come over to the bench, and if players think you're going to repeat stuff, they're not going to listen to you the first time. So you need to have them conditioned that when you're talking, they listen the first time. I always say, if you don't get it when I'm telling you, then you better ask somebody else or whatever, because I'm not going to keep repeating things. That's not good. That's not a good teaching method.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really emphasize that to players. I think the players then, once they understand that, when you're talking to them as a coach, you don't have to be talking all the time. You can just say things one time, and then, hey, let's get it done. Let's do it. And then you put the onus more on the player than you do on, all right, what you're saying. So now player knows what they're going to do. Now it's up to them to make sure that they're following through with what you said. And it goes toward the timeouts in games.
Yeah.
Hey, if two players aren't listening, you change defenses, it's not going to be a very good situation. So that's really important. And then other things that in practice, a lot of times, I'll start to count backwards when something. I'll say, all right, let's go to our UCLA drill, and 2 lines over here or whatever, and I'll say 10, 9, and continue, because I want them to get in a good pace of practice. And then that develops a good level of leadership too. So now you have guys saying, hey, line up over here, let's get going on this. So now you kind of see who your leaders are, and it causes players to communicate and to talk, because of the fact that you're asking them to get in a drill. They know the drill, they get into it, and then they continue that drill. And you see players who step up and really communicate with those. So I think that's a great way to develop your communication and leadership in your players.
Question on that. I want to jump in on that. Like, one of the biggest questions I wanted to ask you today was, how do you develop a leader from a kid that's very quiet, and he may be like a lead by example type guy, but he's not trying to talk, but the team needs him to talk?
Yeah.
How do you go about making that happen without screaming at him and making him run?
Yeah. Well, and there's different types of leadership as well. Some guys are just naturally more vocal than other guys are. And a lot of times what I will do is I'll stop practice and ask questions. So players have to regurgitate what happened in practice to the group. And I think a lot of times that brings out their leadership qualities. And I'll use a lot of leadership phrases in practice. I'll say, hey, Johnny, use your leadership voice, for example, where he's kind of muttering. Johnny, hey, use your leadership voice. Then he would know, speak up so everybody can hear. Or use your leadership style to communicate, meaning look the person in the eye, call them by their first name, and hey, Johnny, that was really a great way. You did that drill. So you really, I think, emphasize the fact that, leadership takes a lot of different forms, and some forms are just not going to be as vocal as other forms. But using phrases in practice, I think, really helps, just knowing the leadership style. Or I'll say, if they're lined up in a line, hey, Johnny, that's way to be a great leader. It's front of your line. You're showing great leadership ability. Or even like after practice, a player goes over and picks up some cups from the bench with water, that had water in it. I'll say, Johnny, that's a great way to show leadership. You're showing leadership by doing that. So they understand what leadership is. A lot of kids, a lot of players, they don't understand what leadership is, or even how to show leadership. But those kind of acts that they do that way, and how they talk and how they conduct themselves, those are all leadership type of actions. And that I think kids, players need to understand that's showing leadership.
Kind of to that point, and talking about the pace of practice, and then we'll kind of move on to your time with the junior national team. Something I noticed in Coach Boeheim's practice, he really lit into one of the players. I'm not going to mention his name, but he really lit into one of the players, and he was getting on his nerves because he lit into him like 3 times within like a 15-minute span. So the last time he subbed him out of practice and did something that I learned from you, as far as like, they need to be side by side. Like, talk about your communication with that player. Cause you said, I never stand toe to toe with my kids because that's confrontational. And that's Coach Boeheim subbed him out. And he was, trust me, he was not whispering when he came to the sideline, but he did bring him alongside and was explaining to him one-on-one, but he subbed him out to keep the pace of the practice going so that he didn't have to keep stopping. So kind of talk about your communication rules with players and what you've learned in that. I'm sure at the beginning of your career, you probably maybe weren't the communicator you are nowadays.
Oh, no question. And I think that's something you learn over time. But I think that all goes back to building a trust with your players. That the trust that Coach Boeheim has with his players, obviously, has been built over time. So the times that he kind of, as we say in the coaching world, goes off on a player for not doing something correct, that's not like it just comes off the cuff. I mean, he's had a relationship with players for maybe 1, 2, or 3 years, so they understand, first of all, they understand why he said that. They understand, they understand coaches. Sometimes there's a need to get their attention in other ways than we normally would, but we don't use it all the time. We just do it. We pick and choose. I'm sure Coach Boeheim is the same way as I've been to Coach K's practice. I've been to Tom Izzo's practice, Coach Wright's practice. They all have their times where, they're going to get the players' attention. And when they do that, it's out of the ordinary for them. But the players have trusted them, for many, many, many practices, years. So they understand where and why the coach does that. Now, when we talk to players, I think as a young coach, I stopped practice way too much, because then you have no flow to your practice. So I've learned, all right, I'm going to pull a player out a lot of times to visit with him, or I'll just pull him out and say, go visit with Coach Griffith. I'm not going to visit with you, but you go visit with Coach Griffith. And so you keep the flow of practice, just like a game. I think that, for me, that was really important, that happens, rather than stop practice for every time that a player messes up or commits a turnover or whatever. I think it's really important you keep that practice at a great pace, and you find other ways to do that. And I just think that's, to me, that was a big help as a coach.
Got you. So the junior national team, that's a big part of what you're doing now. Talk about, how student athletes can earn an invite to camp. what they need to do at that camp to be invited to the next one, because it's not an automatic, process. Kind of talk about that.
Well, when we first started the junior national team in 2009, we had Brad Beal, Andre Drummond, Michael Gilchrist, Quinn Cook, Tony Roten. Those guys were all, we certainly didn't know much about this whole thing. So we kind of delved into it, just kind of picking players off the cuff. And fortunately, we picked some really good players.
Yeah.
So during those 10 years, I think we've obviously gravitated toward, it's not really a science, but it's more of what we're looking for to make a team. And in any team, we have several mini camps now, which give us an idea of what the kids can do before a training camp. Mini camp will bring in 35 to 40 kids and possibly then look at them and take them through drills in a mini camp situation before we decide who to bring in as training camp. So personally, we want to see everybody we invite. That's really important for us. There's a lot of kids that are very skilled, but we want to see what they do, how they react to coaching. We want to see things that they can do, things they do that take no skill, attitude, coachability, body language. Those kind of things are really important to us, because we're not an all-star team. We're trying to build a team to win gold medals. Mm-hmm. And that's our number one goal. So in having said that, we want to see how those kids respond to their teammates, how good teammates they are. So we actually go see every kid that we invite. Me and myself and BJ Domingo, we go actually watch the players, see if they fit to what we want. I think that's really been an important part for us. And we may bring him to mini camp and we find out, what, he's probably not going to be invited to training camp because he doesn't embrace the things that we want. And there's several different things that we look at when I go evaluate a player. First of all, obviously they got to be skilled, but there are thousands of skilled players. I mean, literally thousands in the United States. We have that luxury of having a lot of skilled players. They got to be smart. So now there's not as many kids are smart as you'd think. Smart goes into decision making on the court and knowing when a teammate needs to get the ball and just awareness, having a big awareness on the court. That's being smart. Then we also, toughness is a huge thing for us. Over the past several years, we decided, what, we're not going to take a kid who isn't tough. We got to have tough kids, because international competition, those players are tough minded, they're tough physically. We got to have players that are tough. We don't want players that are just not tough. Versatility, got to have kids that are versatile, and mostly on the defensive end. So we want to have players that can guard many positions. Can we guard can a big guard a point guard in a switch situation? That's being versatile. Can he play more in one position? And we've had kids that come to us and they, by God, they're only a point guard only. They're not going to be an off guard or a wing guard. Well, then you're probably not going to make our team, because you're not one of the top 10 point guards. So versatility is huge. Yeah. And then the last thing, and maybe the most important thing, is how resilient are they? Things go wrong on the court. How resilient are they? That's, to me, that's one of the big factors of how we look at it. Resilience and toughness are kind of a little bit in the same boat, but you make a mistake on the court, how resilient are you to get back on defense? If you make one mistake, do you make two? So those really are the five kind of pillars that we look at and evaluate players on. When I go out, and like this weekend, I'm here in Benton, Arkansas, evaluating players, and that's kind of what I look at. How do they fit those five pillars?
I love to hear about the not getting back on defense thing, because that's my number one pet peeve, when they turn
Yeah,
the ball and then they either foul the kid or they don't get back, and it's a
right.
5-on-4. That drives me insane. So that's good to hear from you.
Yeah.
So some people might say, it's Team USA. You have the best players in the country. Objectively, they say this should be easy. It isn't, because I know it's not, but they kind of act like you can just roll the ball out and we're automatically going to win. That's a part of the American arrogance that we unfortunately have to deal with in this country. But kind of talk about how you go about, like we were talking a little bit earlier about objectively, like building that culture, and like you're either doing this or you're not going to be playing with us type thing, because you say that, but you say it in much nicer terms, I'm sure.
Well, we really, when players come in, first of all, now is much different than it was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, because most players know what USA basketball is. They want to be a part of USA basketball. Whereas in the early times, 2009, 10, really you had to sell them really on the fact of playing for USA basketball. They didn't really know what it was. And we are, in our country, our kids, there's really only 2 ways to serve your country. And that's by, fighting, going to war, or through sports, representing. And so most of our kids never represent our country in any form. They represent their high schools or club teams or whatever, but they don't really understand what it is to represent your country. And when they see other players that have this tremendous pride for Argentina, France, Spain to play for, I think it raises their awareness a lot. And so we really try and make it a point that you're playing for something much bigger than you are, than the coaches are. So we take the ego completely out of whatever whatever goes on with the players. Our expectations are we have certain standards. We call them standards. We don't have rules. We have standards with our players, and our standards are extremely high for our players. And we say the best way that you can show respect for an opponent is to play hard no matter what the score is. And so we really stress that that fact of it. And we also, I think one thing that has helped us is we use the word standards a lot to our players. So for instance, I may stop practice and say, one of our standards is great defense. We are not living up to our standard right now. So I think we need to have a much better level of concentration than we have right now to raise our level, to raise our standard. And so we use that standard a lot with USA, as far as USA basketball goes. And then we simply tell players, we are building a team. We're not building an all-star team. This team has to go compete on a regular basis for a gold medal. And we have not, and we use now we can use examples. We've had teams for 10, 11 years. So we can use examples of players who are in the NBA right now, but they didn't make our team for various reasons. So I think that kind of hits home a little bit as well.
Got you. So I want to talk about the old adage, you never know who's in the gym. It may not even be that old of an adage, but kind of talking about, players, they'll see you, in your Team USA gear on the sideline and stuff, but they may not know, BJ Domingo. They may not know, some of the high school coaches that personally, that will text you about a kid, either negatively or positively. Can you kind of give a story and speak to that, as far as just motivating kids to play hard regardless of who you're playing against and regardless of the situation?
Yeah, well, again, I think we emphasize playing for something bigger than they are. And so when we say, you're not playing for you're not playing for coaches, you're playing for USA basketball. And so that connotation is a culture that you have to embrace. And some kids really, Jalen Suggs would embrace that. I mean, he was the ultimate competitor. Scotty Barnes, he was the ultimate competitor. Jalen Green, Gary Trent Jr. Those guys were so competitive, and they would embrace the fact that, USA basketball is a different level. And I'm going to display a higher level than maybe I would normally playing for my high school team. So I think that all goes into the mix. And now we have players that can come back and talk to our kids about that. So it makes it really, our culture has continued to thrive because of previous players that have been in our program. I think that has a lot to do with now our players, taking that very, very seriously, but also understanding what it is to be a part of the USA basketball culture, so to speak.
A few more questions and we'll get you out of here. I appreciate your time today, Coach. What have you learned from Coach K and Pop? Arguably the two of the best coaches, in the game today, and then also just all time. What little things or big things have you picked up from observing them and watching how they do what they do?
Yeah, I think most of it's some little things, subtle things that they do what a lot of it's terminology and how they deal with players. They're both dealing with high level players at their institutions, and really it's how that relationship is formed both on and off the court. I think that's really an intriguing factor to me. It's not so much really what they're teaching. Like I said, it's more how they teach it and how they get their point across to the players, both verbally and non-verbally, on the court. And so I think that's really something that, they're both really good tacticians. They're both really good, but before you get to that point, that relationship has been built. They know the pressure. They know the points they can get to with the kids. In other words, they know what makes each one tick a little bit. And so Pop may really get on somebody hard in front of everybody. He knows that player can handle it, and that's a way to motivate him. He also knows that he needs to take another player off to the side and talk to him in very low, calm voice to get him motivated. So just watching them interact with players is really intriguing to me, and how they get the most out of their players.
And that's a Coach Wooden thing. I treat my players fairly. I don't treat them equally. That's one of my one of my favorite quotes. So
you're in fairness. You earn your fairness.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. You earn your fairness. If you're consistently to practice, like 1 minute before practice starts, shoes untied, not ready for practice, and then you're late for a practice, I will handle you different than a kid who's always there 10, 15 minutes before practice, ready to go. And one day he's late. That, to me, that's a different scenario. So you earn your fairness. So
I'm definitely using that.
I use that a lot. Yep.
I like that. So, you've been at a lot of different levels of basketball, at the high school level, as far as, rebuilding program and, an established program, your alma mater, coaching it with the junior national team. What goes into success, and, is it different between the levels, or is it pretty consistent as far as what you need to bring as a coach?
I think it's pretty consistent. I think, I think the consistent part to it is, it's not so much about, I'll go back to some of the things I said. The consistent part is it's really how you treat your players, what your standards are for your players, because players will rise to your standards. They don't want to disappoint a coach. They're not going to they want to try to hit those standards. So I think communicating your standards, being a great communicator, building relationships is all about coaching, and much more so. As a young coach, I thought it was all the X's and O's. Oh, we do this, we're going to win. No, it's about, all right, relationships, knowing which button to push on certain players, how to motivate players, what makes each player tick is much more important and relative to how you're going to do as a team than the X and O's you run.
So you're pretty close with former head coach of mine, Coach Jones.
Yep.
You've been pretty integral to his coaching development. He said that, and I've heard that from a couple different people. What traits did you see in him early on? That led you to believe he'd be a great coach with Team USA, and then what parts of his coaching game have developed the most in that time?
That's a good question. Mike's a very, very close friend of mine. We talk almost on a daily or every other day basis. Even now that he's at Virginia Tech, but first of all, Mike's very knowledgeable. Secondly, what I liked about Mike to be part of USA Basketball is he understands players. He understands how to coach them. He understands relationships. He understands he understands how to make that player better. So he gets it as a coach. Not all coaches, are in the same field as he was. And so when we asked him to come on board with USA Basketball, we knew he was a great relationship builder with his players. And I think that was probably the number one thing. And then he knows a lot of basketball. So that was the second thing. And then, again, he's a head coach, but he was also a great assistant. He knew how to be a great assistant. He knew what things he had to do to be a good assistant to make our program better. And he and I just got along really, really well from that aspect of it.
Cool. So another one of your assistants, Coach Turner, he said, I got to ask you two questions. Your top 3 steakhouses is the first.
Oh man, there's a lot of good steak. My top one is Peter Luger's in Brooklyn, New York. That's without a doubt. That's still my top one. Probably my second favorite one is El Gaucho's in Portland, Oregon. Okay. That's without a doubt one of the best. Wolfgang's in Manhattan is really good as well, and Joe's Steakhouse in Vegas and Chicago are right up there. So okay. I got one in every city. Bones in Atlanta is really good. Charlie's in Orlando is really good. Manny's and Murray's in Minneapolis is great. So I got them in every town, every city.
Yeah, he said I got to ask you about steaks or desserts. One of the two. That's right. And then he said you wouldn't duck this question, so I'm going to hold you to it. Who are the top 5 players you've coached with Team USA and why?
Oh man, I gravitate toward the guys who are just bulldogs, who just are tough. Brad Beal, just because not of his skill level, but guys like Gary Trent Jr., Trey Jones, Tyus Jones, Jalen Suggs, Scotty Barnes, Jalen Green. Those guys are just tough-minded, and they just hated to lose. I mean, everything they did, they won. I mean, we'd put them in a 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 games in our camps. They'd win. They're just winners. And so I gravitate towards those guys who are ultra competitive.
Got you. So the last question I got for you, I read Coach Roy Williams, former head coach at UNC. Love his book. Big fan of him and the school, obviously. Yep. And he said something that's always stuck with me. So I'm paraphrasing. In 30 years, as a coach, in 30 years, you're going to see something in the player that you coached, and you better make sure it's positive. Whether that's, like a trait or a saying or something, you're going to see that in a player you've coached in 30 years. What do you hope your players have taken away from their time with you?
Well, I think, first of all, you hope that they take away some of the little things that you told them about, not necessarily about the game of basketball, but about what standards they have. Jason Tatum I forgot to mention him. He's one of my favorite all-time players. Justice Winslow. But those guys still come back and say, hey, Jabari Parker, hey, you know what? I remember this mind candy, and it comes back to me every day, what we talked about in our pregame practice, session. So those kind of things, how their life has been affected based on the fact that they were with us, I think is really good.
Got you. So the last part of every podcast, I kind of turn the tables and ask if you've got a question for me. So
Oh man.
I'll throw that one your way.
Yeah. What's one of the best podcasts you've had?
One of the best podcast hosts, you mean? Guests?
Yeah.
I mean, this has been great. I really enjoyed having Jay Billis on. I had the opportunity to work his academy. I think that was 3 summers ago now. And just his experience as a player, and most people don't know he coached in 3 Final Fours.
Right.
They forget that. So he really does know his stuff. So he's obviously an entertaining dude as well. So he's definitely doesn't mince words. So that was a lot of fun.
Great friend of mine. So
yeah, learned a lot from Coach Jones. Coach Jones was great. I had my coach Pratt on recently, Josh Pratt. So it's been a great way to selfishly to learn, from all these people that I'm talking to, but it also gives me an opportunity to reach out to people. And, I have a reason that I'm asking them to talk. It's not just, hey, do you have 30 minutes to talk to a stranger about, something. So it's been a great opportunity for me to learn as well. It's helped in my development for sure. So, talk about where the people can find you on Twitter, and then we'll get you out of here. I'm sure you got something going on today.
Yeah. Check out, at dshow23 is my Twitter account, and you'll find I do everything is basketball related except for stakes. I show pictures of stakes, but I'll do mind candies. It's really, I think I've gotten a lot of feedback that really helped coaches that follow me on Twitter. So I think that's I try and do something with that. Snow Valley Basketball School, coaches out there who would like to work it. It's like a coaching clinic for a week. Just go to snowvalleybasketball.com and find out information. We'd love to have, the players out there too. We have 4 great sessions, 3 of boys, 1 of girls. So I think that's been real positive. And then check out usab.com, our website for USA Basketball. And check out our license, gold license. You can get of all the speakers we've had, over 250, 260 for our academies. All of them are on there that you can listen to. So that's a great resource as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Coach. Stay safe out and enjoy yourself out there.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.